Let's start the show. You already know who it is. My name is Mike Kyle, aka the Fantasy Vulture. I have over a decade worth of fantasy football experience and have continuously competed for fantasy championships over the course of the past 6 seasons. But enough of me. I'm here for you. On today's episode of the FB Show, we are finishing off the NFC West for our All-32 NFL team preview series, where we take a look at every NFL team through the lens of fantasy football, and we are wrapping up this division with the Los Angeles Rams, a team that has a lot of fantasy pieces who can be viable for your team this season. But before we get started with that, I need 3 quick things from you. First off, smash that subscribe button, power running back style, so you never miss a video from me. We're posting every single day leading up to the 2020 NFL season. Also hit that like button down below, like an open receiver downfield, Patrick Mahomes style. And lastly, you can follow me on all social media at FFVulture. You can also shoot me a text, 330-302-1554. It's been a great time, especially on social media. I'm having so much fun just trying to find ways to redistribute content or just expand upon different thoughts as far as players go. I'm trying a new thing out on Twitter where I just tweet out a random player and I give all my analysis for them in basically 280 characters, maybe a little bit more. I did one with Drew Brees today where I went into 2 tweets about it, but it's been really fun so far. I'm really looking forward to becoming more active on social media for this brand and for the content that we put out here on a day-to-day basis. But let's just jump right into it. I know I've been saying that for every transition, as far as I feel like I've gotten my head in that a little bit, which is like, let's jump in to the Los Angeles Rams, and we're going to start off at the quarterback position, like we always have done throughout this All-32 series, and we're going to look at Jared Goff to start. So in 2019, Jared Goff finished at quarterback 13. He had a very up and down season as you're looking at those weekly finishes, right? 8 games as the quarterback 1, 3 games as the quarterback 2, and 5 games as the quarterback 3. And once again, if you're playing in a 12-team single quarterback league, that means you were pretty much really only happy in 8 games. And, you know, QB2 games are not the worst things, all things considered. Like, they're fine. But you would like to obviously finish towards the top, and those QB3 games are absolutely unbearable for your fantasy team that's shooting yourself in the foot. But really what I want to talk about is his stats from last season in totality. So he had 394 completions on 626 pass attempts, which is just an astronomical number. He threw for over 4,600 yards. We love that. 40 rushing yards. Is not really a mobile quarterback by any means, but this is really what I want to focus in on. And that's 24 touchdowns and 16 interceptions. And those interceptions are the things that are going to kill you. He does have the tendency to get in the habit of potentially just tanking a game or 2 throughout the season just due to bad decision making. And you never know when that game is going to come, so that's always a bit worrisome for Jared Goff. But the touchdown numbers too, like that's a really interesting number at 24. I'm going to pull up where how many touchdowns he threw for previously, because we've known what this offense can be, and it very much hinges on what version of Jared Goff you're going to get, but it also is relying upon the running game as well, right? Todd Gurley for a long time was the face of this Rams offense, and then because what that allows defenses to do is to focus it on the run. That opens up the passing game, so Jared Goff gets a little bit more flexibility and a few more easy looks throughout the season, which those add up when you're playing a game like fantasy football. So yeah, looking at this, right? So when I put these touchdown numbers, that's always passing touchdowns plus rushing touchdowns. I don't know if I've ever fully come out and said that, but going through his numbers right now, he threw for 22 touchdowns last year, 32 the year before, and 28 in 2017. Right, so this was by far the least amount of touchdowns that he's thrown in the past 3 seasons, and it's also the most interceptions he's thrown. I mean, it looks like that the interceptions progressively keep scaling upwards. So he started with 7 in 2017. He also only threw for 7 in his rookie year as well. 12 in 2018, and then 16 in 2019. So what the trend's kind of been, at least what it looks like, is as the rushing attack has declined in Los Angeles, so has Jared Goff's productivity. And now really we only kind of have a 1-year sample size in that, because last year just the running game was just kind of all over the place and a mess. But you can kind of see the correlation there as well, and it also happened in 2016. It happened in 2016 too. I know he was a rookie, but that is something that we still have to consider. When you look at the adjusted score for Jared Goff, 16.4 points per game, which is very similar to Gardner Minshew numbers. 16 games played, new finish of quarterback 21. So once again, like, that's not even really a guy that you're even considering starting, especially in a single quarterback league. Now, if it's a super flex, that's something different, but he's probably your number 2 and not your number 1. Going into this season in 2020, his ADP is currently quarterback 17, going in the 11th round, back at the 11th, early 12th, at 11-12. I have him ranked at quarterback 16. I've tried pretty much all offseason to convince myself to go all in on Jared Goff, just because I'm someone who typically likes to wait on a quarterback later in drafts, and I think this Rams offense has the potential just to be good, just naturally based upon the receiving weapons that they have. It's one of the reasons why Goff had 8 games at quarterback 1 last year, right? So I've tried, and it's definitely possible, right? It's just one of those things where it's like, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? Does the quarterback make the receivers better, or do the receivers make the quarterback? Or do the receivers make the quarterback better? It's a very interesting question to ask, especially for a system like the Rams, who are in the midst of changing their scheme, right? Everyone was trying to catch McVay just a few years ago, and now McVay's pivoting again his entire approach. So I'm not really sure what to expect from this Rams offense this season because of that. And I've kind of shied away from Jared Goff as a result, just because, again, I don't know which version of Jared Goff I'm going to get. I don't know what his actual fantasy reality is going to be. And if I'm waiting on a quarterback, I'm not going to take a shot on a guy like that. I'm going to try and get someone who I know what I'm going to get week in and week out. Because by the looks of this, and just by the looks of the weekly finishes, you know, you were fine essentially 10 times, but there were 6 games most likely where you were just not happy, and you can't have mistakes like that at the quarterback position when we only have 13 regular season games in total plus playoffs. So I'm staying away from Jared Goff. But who I'm not staying away from, actually, that was a very poor transition because I'm not ready to talk about wide receivers yet. But we're going to talk about the running backs, and we are just going from a downslide to one position to a potential downslide in another. And I don't mean to be negative here, but I can't stand Darrell Henderson. I don't think he's that talented of a running back. He wasn't even good enough to get on the field last year. He wasn't able to beat out Malcolm Brown for the number 2 role behind Todd Gurley. And I debated if I even wanted to make a Darrell Henderson profile, but I ultimately felt like I had to just based upon where he's going in drafts, and that's why you like these stats and these weekly finishes, like nothing matters, right? Because he was the third fiddle behind Todd Gurley and Malcolm Brown. But I guess we're just going to go over them really quickly anyway, right? A 2019 finish. I think he is the player who is the lowest ranked player from last season that I'm doing a player profile of, at least from what I've done so far. So I do plan these out a little bit in advance, and I think he is the lowest. So in 2019, he was running back 92 in standard, 95 in PPR. And what's actually really funny is the data sheet that I had for this, I think I stopped at running back 60 for last season. So I had to go back through and just reconfigure some numbers specifically for Darrell Henderson, a guy that I don't even really believe in. So that was just a little bit of an extra knife in the ribs a little bit. So running back 92 in standard, running back 95 in PPR. He only had 39 total carries and 4 receptions, 147 rushing yards, and 37 receiving yards. Didn't find the end zone. I feel like I have to sneeze here. Oh boy, we're going to keep going. 0 games as a 1, 0 games as a 2, 1 game as a 3. He appeared in 13 games, averaged 1.6 points per game. His new finish is running back 95 or 98. So why are we talking about Darrell Henderson? And the reason why we're talking about Darrell Henderson is just because there is an opportunity for him this season. If you remember a guy who also had a really bad rookie season as far as touchdowns go, Melvin Gordon has also scored 0 touchdown his rookie year. Now, does that mean that Darrell Henderson's going to turn into Melvin Gordon? Probably not. Most likely not. But we do have to recognize the fact that the Rams typically have a very good offense, and that means that the running back position is valuable. So that is just one thing that we have to consider. Now, the play that we're going to talk about next kind of hinders Henderson's value, and I'll get into that a little bit later. And I guess just adjust to it right now. What am I talking about? So Darrell Henderson is going at running back 37 in the 8th round, in the middle of the 8th. I have him ranked at running back 46. And the reason why is we're just going to combine 2 player profiles in one. And the reason why I have Darrell Henderson so low is because I am obsessed with Cam Akers. I have Cam Akers ranked as my number 4 overall rookie in this class. I was in love with his tape, and his player comparison for me was Alvin Kamara. And the reason why is because I felt like their play style was extremely similar. Now Cam Akers can handle a little bit of a bigger workload compared to Kamara. If you remember, Kamara had about 170 carries, and then on top of that, 87 receptions, whereas Akers had 230 carries in college and 30 receptions last season. But in terms of just like their play style, that shifty, speedy, just burst through the middle into the secondary and make a man miss, like that was Cam Akers. And I was obsessed with watching his tape. I was really, really impressed from the Florida State product. So Cam Akers, his measurables, he's 5'10", 217 pounds, and a speed of 4.47. So he's not as quick as Kamara, but man, he moves just like him, and I was just super impressed by that. His stats from 2019 in college, like I just said, 230 touches, plus 30 receptions, 1,100 rushing yards, 225 receiving yards, and 18 touchdowns. He basically was the Florida State offense all last season, so I know that he's able to handle the workload, and that makes me really excited for him in Los Angeles potentially. And what makes me incredibly optimistic about Akers is the fact that they did spend their 2nd-round pick on him. The Rams did not have a 1st-round pick, and this is a team that has and kind of continues to have a few holes all across their team, but especially at offensive line. But what do? They draft a player at the running back position a year after they draft Darrell Henderson, where you have to think, right? If they thought that Henderson was the guy, there was no need to take Cam Akers, first off, probably at all, and there's absolutely no need whatsoever to take him in the 2nd round. So they prioritized the running back position over other positions that they probably have a bigger need for after they already drafted Henderson last season. So what's Cam Akers' ADP? His ADP is running back 35. So we're going to go back to David Akers, I just combined them both, to Darrell Henderson. Darrell Henderson's going at running back 37. So if you tell me I get the rookie with upside, they're basically going 2 or 3 picks apart. Yeah, they're going 3 picks apart. So you're telling me I get the rookie with upside 3 picks earlier than a guy that we've seen and really didn't impress anybody when he was on the field last season and couldn't even make it onto the field the majority of the season? I'll take that rookie every single day, and I won't think twice about it. Plus, I am also just naturally higher on Akers. Like I said, just because of the talent, I just think he's an incredible running back. So where do I have these guys finishing? And that kind of becomes the question now for this Rams backfield. I have Akers finishing at running back 27. Overall, I just think it's his job. It's his job to lose. But the question that is really throwing me into a loop now, and I actually moved to Akers a spot back before I started recording based on some of the quotes that McVay came out with today. And McVay's always just trying to throw people for a whirl, and that makes it a little bit difficult to decipher what's actually going to happen with the Rams at all. If you remember, he was very vague about Todd Gurley, and then all of a sudden they kind of changed their offense, and they made it seem like it wasn't really a big deal, right? So we have a history of this. But I have Cam Akers. I'm like, where I'm going with this? I looked at my phone. I glanced at my phone for a second. So the quote that came out today was McVay basically said that all 3 guys in this Rams backfield have talent, and they all are going to have the opportunity to be on the field. So that includes Malcolm Brown, who I don't have a player profile for because I don't think he's going to be fantasy relevant for your team this season. If you want to spend your last pick on him just because he could be fantasy viable, don't hate that, especially in a year that is going to be fluctuating due to COVID. But ultimately, like, just understanding that quote that McVay came out with, where it's like, all these guys are going to get the opportunity, that scares me, right? Because if Akers ends up in an RBBC, like, that's obviously going to tank his value, and I would definitely move him back because you're then looking at essentially a three-headed monster instead of a two, and obviously if it's two, it's usually 50-50, and then if it's three, who knows what that split in the backfield's going to be. So I would move Cam Akers definitely back, so there is some concern there. So I guess ultimately my thing with Akers is that, first off, if you're in a dynasty league and you're doing a rookie draft this late, please take Akers, because I think Akers is a play for the future more than the present, but there is the potential for him to be extremely relevant in the present, in the now, just due to this offense, right? Like I said, this offense is just one that tends to move the ball and score a lot of points while doing so. And that means that the backfield is going to be extremely valuable. It all depends on who actually gets that work. So again, I'm going to take the rookie with upside compared to the guy who we saw last season who could barely get on the field. And that's why I have Darrell Henderson ranked at running back 46, just because I'm not really a big believer in him or his talent. But now let's move on to players who I'm actually really excited about, and that is Cooper Kupp. I owned Cooper Kupp last year in 3 leagues? Definitely 2. I don't think it was 3. So Cooper Kupp last season in 2019 finished as the wide receiver 4 in both standard and PPR. He had 5 games as the wide receiver 1, 2 games as a wide receiver 2, and 3 games as a wide receiver 3. He had 134 targets, 94 receptions, 1,161 yards, and 10 touchdowns. And that 10 touchdowns were really the selling point of Cooper Kupp last season. He was just an absolute touchdown machine. When you take a look at his adjusted score, 14 points per game and half points, 16 games played, new finish of wide receiver 8. And that is what I really want to get into with Cooper Kupp, because Kupp dominated during the early parts of last season. But then it was the game after the Bengals, so he just torched the Bengals. I think that was a game in London. He torches the Bengals, right? And then I believe their bye was the next week, just because that's kind of the way that the NFL season works, where if you play overseas or across the pond or in a different country, whatever the case may be, you then get a bye the next week just because you're adjusting to time zone changes and things like that. So I believe they played Cincinnati, had the bye, then he came back for the second half of the season just naturally, right? And he was really bad towards the back half of the season. And it was partly due because they were in the middle of just changing their offense. Once again, McVay was always just very vague about that. So they shifted to them focusing on an offense that used the tight end instead of another wide receiver. So Kupp's playing time went down for just some unknown reason. He was also coming off of an ACL injury where they felt like that they focused or that they used him too much early on in the season, so they wanted to kind of dial his workload back. So we kind of had a tale of two halves for Cooper Kupp. And I'll tell you what, towards the end of the stretch, because you had him and he was just putting up numbers left and right, you started to rely on him in the second half of the season, like a late in the playoffs or the championship. And I believe, if I remember, I benched Cooper Kupp in my championship game in Week 17. Now, it ultimately didn't matter because he scored a touchdown in Week 17 against Arizona. And I started Deebo Samuel Monday night against Seattle, who also scored a touchdown. So it didn't hurt me, but it was just something that I told a few friends I was doing, and they looked at me like, "Are you crazy?" But no, because I went through that Cooper Kupp experience last season where it was just after that Bengals game, you just never knew what you were going to get. And that made there were times where you were just barely scraping by starting Cooper Kupp in your lineup. So it was a little bit concerning towards the second half of the season. And there are still some concerns right now. Like, this is not a thing that's going away. Because if this offense continues to change and continues to evolve to focus that tight end position a little bit more, what happens to Cooper Kupp this season? I don't know. Brandon Cooks is gone, so that does make, I think, his workload a little bit safer. So, he's going to be on the field. I don't think he's going to have too much more regression from there. So I'm really excited about Cooper Kupp this season, all things considered, just because he is a touchdown machine. He is a guy that's going to get 130 targets again, which is super valuable, especially in a PPR, and he just produces. Now, is it a little bit inconsistent? Yes, of course, as you can see, like 5 games is a 1, a few games is a 2, 3 games is a 3. So, but more often than not, you were happy with Cooper Kupp, and I think that's what's going to happen again this season. So his ADP is currently wide receiver 11, going in the 3rd round. I have him ranked at wide receiver 18. And that's just because I'm not sure how I feel about... is it more so that I don't know what to expect from the Rams offense, even though I expect it to be good? It's a combination of that and the fact that... Hang on, I'm pulling up my rankings right now. And it's also the fact that... there's just a lot of other players that I think have higher ceilings ahead of him, right? Like, I don't know if you know this or not, and this might be a hot take. There's a lot of good wide receivers in the NFL. I know, shocking, incredibly shocking. That might be the most shocking thing that you've heard all season or all year rather. So like I have Juju ahead, Mike Evans, Allen Robinson, Odell, Amari Cooper, AJ Brown, Adam Thielen, Calvin Ridley. Like, how many of those players would you take Cooper Kupp over? Right? I'm not sure. For me, I'm playing it a little bit safe with Cooper Kupp this season. I don't like him as my first wide receiver. How is that? I would rather have Cooper Kupp as my wide receiver 2 than my wide receiver 1. So if you get him as your 2, love it. If you get him as your 1, I'm a little bit shaky, a little bit worried about that, just because we've seen his playing time be reduced, but he's still productive. So just trying to figure out what you're getting a week in and week out from Cooper Kupp can be a little bit challenging at times. However, a player that I'm really, really excited about this season is Robert Woods. And this is why. So, if you just notice, I'm going to put up Cooper Kupp's profile again. And now I'm going to put up Robert Woods. If you look at something there's something that doesn't change whatsoever. And that is the weekly finishes. The weekly finishes are the exact same with Robert Woods. And you could argue that Robert Woods had a better season than Cooper Kupp because of that. And here's what I mean, right? So in 2019, Robert Woods finished at wide receiver 22 in standard, wide receiver 17 in PPR. Okay, right? So that's obviously a big change between Cooper Kupp finishing at wide receiver 4, right? But with those weekly finishes, he had 4 wide receiver 1 performances in the final 5 weeks of the season. So he was red hot, right? And what's the issue here, right? Where did this wide receiver 17 in PPR finish come from, right? Why? Because when you look at the stats, he had 5 more targets than Cooper Kupp, 4 less catches, what's that? I'll do that math. 27 less yards, but 8 less touchdowns. The touchdowns just didn't go Robert Woods' way, and that's something that is absolutely going to change this season. So if we were to just play it safe and play it normal, right? Robert Woods gets 6 touchdowns. Where does he finish then? Right? Because he's for sure probably a top 10 wide receiver or close to it. Easily wide receiver 1. So with that being said, right? Robert Woods did not lose any playing time last season when they made their offensive adjustment, when Brandon Cooks was out with injury, whatever the case was. Robert Woods was always consistently on the field for 95% of the snaps. So with that being said, and knowing what we know now by looking at the stats, the weekly finishes, and the adjusted scores, right? Because this is another thing. Just 12.5 points per game. So that's a 1.5 per game less than Cooper Kupp. 15 games played, new finish, wide receiver 19. So he does go back just a little bit, but Cooper Kupp also went back by 4 slots. I'm really excited about Robert Woods this year. I have him ranked as my wide receiver 17. His ADP is currently wide receiver 25 going in the 5th round. And this is the point that I've been trying to make throughout this entire segment about Woods. Why would you spend your 3rd round draft pick on Cooper Kupp when you can get Robert Woods, who depending on the week is 1A, 1B for this Rams offense, 2 rounds later, and you can load up at other positions? Like, you can make the case for Robert Woods to be your number 3 wide receiver, and he's going to finish as a top 14, top 15 guy potentially, right? That is a very real, likely possibility. for Robert Woods this season. To me, it doesn't make any sense to draft Cooper Kupp because the draft cap is just too much. It's too much when you're getting a guy who plays for the exact same team on the same, obviously the same offense that moves the ball and scores a lot, is expected to have a higher touchdown total, and there's not going to be any change in the other production throughout the season. Robert Woods is another wide receiver similar to Jarvis Landry, Jameson Crowder, and a few of those other guys who are always undervalued and always outperform their ADP. I expect Robert Woods to do it again this season, and he is the Rams wide receiver that I want. Finally, let's talk about the tight end position. And there's one that now the Rams use two tight ends, but the tight end that I want to talk about is Tyler Higbee. Now they also have Gerald Everett, but Gerald Everett to me just doesn't see the consistency that you would like to see from a tight end. To me, he's more so like Dallas Goedert, where he just steals work from the main guy, and that's always frustrating. But what Tyler Higbee did in the second half of last season was unbelievable. I'm going to just real quick pull up the exact finishes, but you can just see on screen right now how incredible Tyler Higbee was. Why did let's see. I should always do this beforehand, but I like doing it live because then I'm able to just see things as I go, right? So in the final 5 weeks of the season, Tyler Higbee had 5 games as a tight end 1. I almost said wide receiver. As a tight end 1. But in those games, he finished as the number 1 tight end 2 weeks of those. He was the number 3 tight end once, the number 5 tight end once, and the number 10? No, and the number 9 tight end one time, right? So what you saw from Tyler Higbee once that offense shifted towards utilizing the tight end a little bit more was just unreal production. He was so good. He's also just an extremely talented tight end as well. So it's not like this. It's not like these were just fluke things, right? We were always waiting for either Gerald Everett or Tyler Higbee to really break out, and it looks like we found the Rams tight end that is going to. So in 2019, he had 89 targets, 69 catches, #nice, 734 yards, and 3 touchdowns. When you look at the adjusted score and the points per game, 8.4 points per game, 15 games played, new finish, tight end 14. But this is the thing that I've realized about the adjusted score, and while I still think it's valuable to use the averages, there are a few players like A.J. Brown, like Tyler Higbee, like Devontae Parker, like Terry McLaurin, just to name a few. I think those are actually really the only main guys who it affects differently. Because we use averages, that really takes into account of the entire season, but it does lack context in the sense of we count A.J. Brown's games with Marcus Mariota in the adjusted score. We count Tyler Higbee's performance in the early part of the season where he wasn't really utilized in the production score. We count Devontae Parker's games when Josh Rosen's at quarterback, right? Terry McLaurin when he's just bouncing off between Case Keenum and Dwayne Haskins, where he was better with Keenum than Haskins, right? So the adjusted score does have some flaws to it, admittedly, but it's still just a tactic that I like to use, and I'll probably end up working through ways to adjust the adjusted score later on in the coming years to make it more reflective. So I'm not too concerned about the adjusted score for Tyler Higbee because the entire first half of the season, he wasn't being utilized, and there's nothing that we can really do about that. So we only can look at really what he was doing when he was on the field, and he was just an unbelievable tight end down the stretch, and he won people a lot of leagues. I actually know for a fact that he is currently chilling on my Dynasty League waiver wire. I forget why. I want to say it was because just we weren't doing additions during the playoffs and things like that. I forget. I don't know the exact reason why Tyler Higbee is currently on the waiver wire, but I'm considering drafting Higbee in my rookie draft. Our rookie draft, you're allowed to draft players that are rookies, that are incoming rookies, and also players who are on the wire. So there's a chance that I try and draft Tyler Higbee in that league. But overall, Tyler Higbee is going at tight end 8 in the 7th round. I am ranked at tight end 5, and it's just because if this offense tracks the way that it was last season and Higbee's going to be just as involved as he was, there's no reason why he can't finish as the top 5 tight end. Again, for the 17th time in this video, this offense is good despite the fact that Jared Goff is inconsistent. Jared Goff is still going to throw the ball a ton. We don't know how that backfield's going to shake out, which means that the passing volume is going to potentially go up even further, which then makes Higbee, Woods, and Kupp all valuable this season. And I think that's pretty much it for Tyler Higbee. Once again, this is very, very clean and very, very cut. He was extremely great when he was on the field and getting consistent targets. And also this offense is projected to at least, if not, this offense is not going to decrease in any way, which is really nice because you have that stability. And there's a chance that it actually goes up if we get Jared Goff to bounce back, if this backfield backfires and they're forced to throw the ball a little bit more. But that's going to do it for my Los Angeles Rams team preview, our All-32 series where we take a look at every single team through the lens of fantasy football. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe down below. And if you actually just would rather listen to this in the podcast version, you can as well. We are available on all podcast platforms, I think. Definitely Google Podcasts, definitely Apple Pods, and Spotify. So I'm sure that's probably where you listen to most of your podcasts anyway. So be sure to subscribe there if you'd rather just listen to me talk instead of visualizing everything. Let's see, what do we got coming up? Who we got next? Oh, we're doing the Indianapolis Colts next, which is really good because they are going to be an interesting team this season as well. So I got some takes. Oh, buddy, do I have some takes about the Colts. Hint, they are hot takes. Let's see. Follow me on all social media platforms at FFVulture. You can also check out the website, ffvulture.com. I'm trying to develop a nice little schedule here to where the website gets updated kind of every other day because, there's a lot of shit happening behind the scenes. We are making moves. And lastly, you can shoot me a text, 330-302-1554. All right, I'm going to get up out of here. Thank you once again so much for watching, and I will see you next time. But remember, people come and go, but fantasy championships are forever. Later.